Thomas Grimshaw, LENR LLC.
Well, thank you and good morning. It's my pleasure this morning to talk to you about a program that I'm having a lot of fun with, and that's the LENR Research Documentation Initiative. And what I want to talk about is what have we learned so far? It's about 4 years old now, and there are a lot of things to report on. Just some very beginning facts about this initiative, this program. Three main objectives are to capture these research records, other records, while they're still available. Many of the active participants in the field, the researchers, began when the field was very young in the late 1989 and the early 1990s. And now they're beginning to leave the field or have left the field. And so we want to capture these records before they leave the field because of retirement, health reasons, or whatever. Want to preserve these records for reanalysis as we understand the field more and understand the LENR phenomenon more. And last but not least, to honor the heroes of cold fusion LENR research. Thanks to Ruby Carrot for referring you're using this term to refer to the participants in this field. The initiative really has its origins in with a pilot project with Ed Storms. I had been doing some earlier work with Ed and hit upon this idea, thinking, you know, what happens if something happened to Ed and all this material, all this information that I was gathering would be lost. And so we did this pilot project. It's hosted by my company, LENR LLC, which is based in Austin, Texas. It was preceded at LENR LLC. It was preceded by the LENR Public Policy Analysis. This goes back to when I was a late career master's student at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas, and continues now under the LENR banner. And also, it was preceded by assistance to interested party. And in this regard, I would point particularly to National Instruments, which was a firm in Austin that had a very strong interest in this field a few years ago, and had a strong presence at ICCF24. As I said, the objectives are to capture records, preserve them, honor the heroes. The methods and procedure shown on the right were developed in the pilot project. When a participant agrees to participate, we set up a project under the umbrella. Then almost in all cases, there's a site visit to collect the records and conduct the interviews. Based on what we collect and the interviews, a timeline of research is developed or other activities. And then arrangements are made for the preservation of the records, as well as reporting the results of the site visit and interviews. Almost always there's more to be done than we have time to do. So in the report, we have what we call a future opportunities for more in-depth coverage for that, for the participant. So far, we have about 28 participants in 17 projects. I'll say more about the projects in a moment, and about 21 reports. So what have we learned during these 4 years? What have we learned about the projects, the participants, the records they have, how the preservation of the records, the interviews that I've conducted with them? What have we learned from this about the status of the field, and what are future opportunities for this program, this initiative? Participant, one picture here is George Miley. He was one of the earlier participants. Dave Nagel has very extensive hard copy records, example shown here. And I'll say more about the archiving at the Marriott Library in a moment. What have we learned then about the projects? Well, the umbrella for the LRDI program shows the 17 projects that I identify, starting with the storms pilot project on the left side. And then almost at the same time, a project with Tom Clater and his friend from also from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Storms also from LANL. And then right after that, Skinner with Dennis Pease, then Dave Nagel, Chino Srinivasan, Mel Miles, working with the folks at SPAWAR, Larry Forsley, Pam Boss, and Frank Gordon to bring a book that had been written by Stan Spock but wasn't in the public record, to get that into the public record. Peter Gluck, George Miley already mentioned, Fran Tanzella, Jean-Paul Biberian, Ludwig Kowalski, Tom Passel, Fusion Facts by Hal Fox, Abd Lomax, Scott Little at Earth Tech, convenient to do since he's right there in Austin, where I live, and SRA International, which is currently underway with Fran Tanzella. So here's the umbrella. We have the systematic procedure. Like I said, the site visits are essential for the hands-on record collection and to conduct the interviews in person. And it's really better to conduct the interviews in person because you get the body language and you get the synergism going. Kind of spurs what's the next good question to ask during the interview. But phone recording is also available. Each element, as I'll talk about in a moment, is recorded with a memorandum, and the set of memorandums then becomes the basis for the project report. This is a report from the initial project I did with Ed Storms, just kind of an example of what the cover looks like. This is actually when I was still at the University of Texas at the Energy Institute, and now the banner, of course, is LENRG. Since the start, I've really extended the scope of the project from the active projects with participants to projects such as the Fusion Facts by Hal Fox, where the participant is no longer available. So what have I learned about the participants? Well, this is an opinion, of course, personal opinion, but universally, I find them to be characterized by these terms: competent, they're creative, very dedicated and driven. Come back to the other one in a minute. Very conscientious. Most of them are highly experienced, bringing their experience from other fields to this field. Sometimes they're fractious. They're highly varied. Sometimes they're secretive, and that's one of the reasons that I always have an agreement for confidentiality of a project. Nothing is released on what we do without their knowledge or concurrence. So it's mostly because of intellectual property concerns, and generally open-minded, although I found most of them are very attached to their approach or to their ideas. As people, again, professional, high integrity, honest, adventurous, very competitive, hardworking, articulate, almost always, original in their attitude, very personable, and and of course opinionated. And this is what makes this fun, working with these interesting people. As far as LRDI projects, I find them very supportive, cooperative, very receptive to my approach. They have a very high integrity in what they are disclosing to me or providing to me. They're engaging, open, helpful, and enjoyable and fun. Not all the researchers, of course, have labs. Not all the participants, I should say. But the ones that do, that are actively doing research in the program, I've seen a real nice cross-section with these 17. I think these 17 researchers present a good cross-section of the field, in my opinion. And for the ones that have conducted experiments, have the full variety of methods: electrolytic gas loading, gas discharge, solid state, and several others. Also, the full range of signatures: the granddaddy, excess heat, going back to Fleischmann and Pons, and also the more definitive nuclear signatures. A variety of facilities where the research is done, starting with university labs, like we have George Miley's Fusion Studies Lab at the University of Illinois. Here's Dave Nagel with his LENR lab at the George Washington University. Private commercial labs, Tom Clater has his High Mesa Technology building there in White Rock, New Mexico, all the way to home labs. Here's Dennis Lett's LENR lab in his backyard in Austin. 4 of the participants have passed since I've done projects with them. Charles Badet in the upper left, Peter Gluck, upper right, Ludwig Kowalski, and Chino Srinivasan. So I was able to capture a lot of their information before their passing. What about the records themselves? Well, generally there are 2 types, documents and data. And they're generally in 2 forms, hard copy and electronic. The main variables in the extent of the records are usually the original data type, what kind of data was collected, how it was recorded, the media that was used, the completeness of the recording, and the method by which they kept their records, and also how they took care of the records over time. Certainly fair to say that there's a major impact of the digital age, which unfolded almost during the same time frame as this field going back to 1989. And I would point to particularly data collection, where a lot of it was originally manual and in laboratory notebooks. With the advent of LabVIEW from National Instruments, I think that would revolutionized a lot of the way that labs operate and record their data. Tom Passel, just this past week, handed over his. I had done a project with him a year ago, and we got everything recorded. And now he's closing his laboratory, and he just turned over his LENR records for archiving, which I'll mention a little bit more in a minute. As far as the categories of records, quite a broad range, as you might expect, starting usually with publications and presentations, as well as unpublished reports. Jed Rothwell's LENRCanada.org is almost always the first stop in a LRDI project. Electronic files, both current and legacy media. There's the Dennis Pease has in his possession the hard drives from the Skinner activities in Columbia, Missouri. As I said, the current and legacy media, both documents and experimental data. Hard copy records, part of the scope of a project, if there is a laboratory, is to describe it quite thoroughly, as both the lab and the notebooks. This is, again, Dennis Lett's backyard laboratory, and these are the notebooks that Mel Miles kept very, very meticulous records in when he was doing experiments at China Lake. And then whatever holdings they have in the field, their library, their books, journals, and conference proceedings. So those are the main categories. As I said, each time I get a piece of the puzzle, slap a cover memo on it describing it, and these memos then are the resource when the report is prepared. Preservation and archiving. I think we have a good solution now for the hard copy records. I've established a good relationship with the Marriott Library. It's at the University of Utah, the home of cold fusion. The special collections at the Marriott Library has a very strong interest in getting these records. They already has very substantial current holdings. I visited the laboratory and then, the library last summer, and then I did a report on the main institutions and organizations, as well as individuals that they currently have. And it's really quite extensive. And the good news is they're very interested in expanding their holdings in this field. I had the good luck to Ed Storms told me he was ready to let his stuff go. He had a huge collection from the pilot project. And so last November, I loaded up a U-Haul truck with his 15 or 16 boxes and trucked them from Santa Fe up to University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And the picture we saw earlier was with Tom Passel. His records are now have now been collected and will be taken, I think, that later this summer in the fall up to the Marriott Library. Electronic records, on the other hand, is a different story. They're currently backed up, the ones that I have collected, on 2 hard drives in my possession, but a central repository is really needed, and it needs to have 2 characteristics: security for confidentiality and easy access for the researchers to know that they can get at their stuff. What about the interviews? Well, I'm kind of repeating myself here a little bit. They're essential for these projects. There's a real synergism between the collection of records and doing the interviews. And they're really necessary for developing a research timeline where that applies. More than one interview is best because these folks remember different things at different passes. And so Fran and I, for example, have done 2 complete different passes on the trajectory of his research while at SRI. The interviews are kind of a glue for the reports. It's not just the bare facts, so to speak, but gives a little life to them on the reality of the people were experiencing as they did the work. In person, as I said, is really superior because of the interaction that can take place. And that's done with a cell phone app. It's very, very good apps available and services available to support this. So I use a cell phone app for the recording of in-person interviews, or if a phone call has to be used, then there's another app for that. And then the audio files are submitted to an online service for transcription. And these are 3 that I found to be very successful in my work: Smart Recorder for the in-person, Tape a Call for the phone interviews, and then I've used rev.com for the transcription, and they're really quite good. What have we learned about the status of the LENR field? Well, this is I think a good cross-section of the overall population of the field. So what I found, I think, is confirmations. In other words, sorry, nothing new. The rejection of marginalization of the field, going back to the 2 DOE reports in 1989, is really kind of a hallmark of the field. Like it or not, I think that's true. The investigators find themselves in a really catch-22 situation, classic Heller situation, where particularly government entities, say, well, you're in a rejected field. Do you now have the evidence to assure me that funding is now warranted? Well, I need that funding to develop the evidence. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have the evidence, so we can't provide funding. And then cycle back around and around and around we go. As far as the community, I think less so now, but in the earlier days, it was kind of a circle of wagons culture because of the rejection. And I think there was a real camaraderie and a lot of mutual respect. The population is pretty much self-selected. It takes a certain amount of bravery and tolerance for risk to be in this field. And I'd say that the community is loosely bonded with sometimes very fractious members. This is not new either. The field, because of the rejection, developed its own system of standalone scientific processes and tools, including the International Condensed Matter Nuclear Society, thank you, Bill Collis, and Preparata, and other medals like the one we saw last night. ICCF conferences, of course, Journal of Condensed Matter Nuclear Science, that's edited by Jean-Paul Biberian. Infinite Energy, edited by Christy Fraser. Jed Rothwell's online library, lenrcanner.org, and the online chat the Google group, which is off and on very active and also very fractious. A lot of really emotional interchange on that Google group. I think it's also characterized, or has been, hopefully we're seeing this come to an end in the near future, but variable and inconsistent funding, very spotty resources from government agencies. We've seen that ARPA-E is now getting in the act for the first time since DOE was at the center of the rejection back in the early days with the ARPA, with the original report. And so we see some spotty resources. You have to credit NASA and the Navy, of course, as being a couple of the major players, and DARPA as well. Private investors of two types: the ones that want to hit a home run, and those that just want to save the earth, like the Anthropocene Institute, the angel investors, and a lot of reliance on non-traditional sources. And I think it's universally recognized and talked about a lot in this field, the need for younger researchers. And certainly we've seen quite a few of them at this conference, and that's very encouraging. What are the future opportunities for this program? Well, to me, it seems like I'm just getting started. A lot more participants yet to be contacted, established projects. The ones that I've done, those future opportunities, we can do greater depth on their holdings. I think we have as far as getting a good permanent archive after this program comes to an end, inevitably. I think we have the Marriott Library is a good solution for the hard copy, but I'm still working on that solution for the electronic files, that electronic repository. There's an integrated report that's been laid out. I've outlined it on what's been achieved and what's been learned from this. I find myself quite busy doing projects as opposed to writing the integrated report, but it's in my bucket list, and it's outlined. More outreach and communications. I think that's a real opportunity, for getting the results of this out, publications and magazine articles, presentations, and both within and outside the LENR field. I need to really work with the participants to get their permission to get their information more into the public realm. As I said, the projects begin with the promise of confidentiality, almost necessary for a participant to agree. But there's a lot of the information that would be really beneficial to get into the public realm, and particularly to the broader scientific community. That sounds like that's my phone. Sorry about that. And then with the bottom line, how can this work be used to advance the LENR cause? How can it be? How can the effort improve the prospects for this field? In conclusion, I make the point again: LENR, realization of LENR and its benefits is essential to humanity as a clean, cheap source, safe, reliable energy source. And that was its original driver, but with the growing awareness and concerns about global climate change and the need to get off fossil fuels has come up in equal in importance. The loss of these records would be a tragedy, not only for the participants and for the field, but for achieving LENR and its benefits, and of course, again, my argument and everyone else's in the field, for the future of humankind. I think the objectives are being met. The methods are well established. A lot of records have been preserved. Long-time archive is partly solved, at least for the hard copy records. Everyone I talk to, participants, of course, think it's a good idea because they participate. But nearly everybody I talk to thinks it's a good idea. And then we have this powerful combination of the records, electronic and hard copy, and the interview transcripts. And it's fun. Thank you. Particularly to the participants, and in many cases, the spouses who really help to collect the information, set up the conditions for the interviews. Thanks to Carl Page, the Anthropocene Institute for expenses, supporting the project, helping with the expenses. Thanks also to Christy Fraser of the New Energy Foundation, Infinite Energy, not only for facilitating the funding with her a nonprofit foundation, but also being a venue for publishing articles in her Infinite Energy, the Infinite Energy magazine, for which she is the editor. Thanks to the folks at the Special Collections of the Marriott Library at the University of Utah for their helpfulness in documenting what they have and being open for receiving additional records. Thanks also to Jed Rothwell for his library. As I said, that's a first stop on almost all these projects to gather what publications exist for a participant. And then last but not least to Ed Storms for his pilot project for the entire LRDI, but also being the first to dispatch his records to the Marriott Library. Thank you. Any questions?
How big would your electronic library be?
How
big would the electronic archive be?
Well, I think by today's storage standards, I don't think it would be that big, really. I haven't thought about it. I haven't really tried to quantify. But, you know, given the fact that these records were collected electronically, going back to the very, you know, to LabVIEW, you know, and collecting electronically, those are not voluminous records. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll throw out a wild guess, no more than 500 gigs. Not sure. Certainly to be this. Let me see if I can turn this thing off. Who knows why that's doing that? Sorry about that. Carl?
Do you consider to use artificial intelligence to take advantage of all this data?
I think it would be an interesting idea to do that. Here's what I found, and I'll be candid about this. The records themselves are, especially the electronic records, are very peculiar to the researcher and to the methods that they were using and how they were collecting them. It will be a grand adventure to sort through those records and collect them and analyze them and process them to bring them to like a common denominator, if you will. But I think there'd be some real challenges. Some investigators say, "Oh, it's impossible." You know, it's just the stuff was collected by different methods over time and using. I mean, it's certainly an interesting idea to use AI to cut through the labor of it, but you have to train the AI on how to do it, and that's going to be really a human effort, and maybe a lot of graduate students in the future once we're living off cold fusion energy. Any others?
Do you have any, forgive me, perhaps it exists already, Tom, but do you have any plans for publishing a public index of the records that you hold?
Yes. Yeah, that's the integrated report at the end. One of the things that I've constructed but haven't completed yet, for example, is a matrix of the investigator across the top and the type of records across the bottom. And, you know, you rate it 1 to 3, you know, excellent, or 3, not so good, or maybe on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever. It would be, I mean, that'll be done as a part of you know, kind of a cross comparison of different researchers. There's a risk in that, of course, because somebody's going to come out looking really good and others maybe not so good. And, because look, the shortage of funds in this field has contributed to what? Underreporting of failures, okay? Everybody's on kind of like a treasure hunt, and they try a method and it doesn't work. They cast it aside and go on to the next method. It's not like in a really rigorous situation in a laboratory that's well funded where all the results are recorded. We just don't have the resources. The researchers just don't have the ability to maintain those records of the failures, and so they really are underreported. That's a part of the records that, if they're there, would be interesting to capture and process and analyze. Yeah.